we see each other in our dreams, let's goof around a little bit, pretend like we don't know each other.
You got it, stranger.
Nice.
That was the moment I fell in love with Ted Lasso. Oh, maybe it was this one.
Solid entrance.
What would you rather be, a lion or a panda?
Actually, no, it was this entire episode.
I really enjoyed getting to spend this time with you, Trent.
You actually mean that, don't you?
No. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Peter C. Hayward, and ever since I learned it was a job, I've wanted to write TV, sitcoms specifically. I'm completely obsessed with structure and plot and characters and jokes and how it all comes together into a nifty little 22-minute package. Season 1 of Ted Lasso is perfect. And today, I'm going to break that down in 5, and only 5, different ways. Let's go. We'll start with the simplest reason. It's funny. I have this theory about why audiences enjoy media, that there's these 3 different metrics or different angles that we approach it from, and everyone cares about them to different degrees. Firstly, there's the genre-specific taste, like if it's a comedy, does it make me laugh? If it's a musical, do I like the songs? If it's action, does it have kick-ass fight scenes and set pieces? This is most apparent with horror films. If you're a horror fan, you don't care about the plot or if the characters are paper thin, you're there for the tension and the scares. Or if you're into body horror, you're into new and weird ways to make bodies horrific. Secondly, there's emotional connection or resonance. How much do I care about the characters? How much do I relate to what's happening to them? Some people are just in it for the feelings. Soap operas are the most extreme example of this. They are just pure, raw emotion at the cost of everything else, including plot or making sense. And then the third way people come at media is what I think of as pure story, like the structure, the world building, the internal logic, how it's all put together. This is my jam. I love nothing more than really clear character motivations and a really well-assembled story. And it's dumb, but as soon as something doesn't make sense, it loses me. As soon as you take a shortcut or you're like, this needs to happen, I don't care anymore. I love whodunits. Like a good mystery is so perfectly assembled. Everything slots into everything else. Everything is there for a reason. That is why I watch media. I find this model helpful because it explains why people disagree so much about movies, like what's a good movie or a bad TV show. It's because we're all coming at it from different angles. We all want different things. Encanto is an exceptional musical and packed full of feelings, but the storytelling is all over the place and the world makes no sense. They set up a bunch of questions and just never answer them. This model helps explain why most people loved it and I just got nothing out of it. Community is an example at the other extreme. The show's creator, Dan Harmon, loves structure and he gets comedy, but that show rarely even tries to make you feel anything. The best media, the classics that stand the test of time that everyone goes nuts for, hit all 3. Genre, feelings, structure. So obviously I think Ted Lasso Season 1 hits all 3 of these. Let's start with genre. It's a sitcom and it is funny. I don't think I have ever laughed so much at 10 episodes of television in my life. But it's a sitcom, you expect it to be funny. If it had just been funny, I would have told a few people. But instead I became evangelical. And part of that is that it's funny unlike anything else on television. It has its own quirky, weird sense of humor that I just had never seen before and I wanted everyone else to see. The characters of Ted Lasso are funny in the way that people in my life are funny. They're trying to make each other laugh. It's realistic.
Hey, can see you at lunch, huh?
Caesar, you later.
Oh. Yes. Yes.
In most sitcoms, funny characters rely entirely on insults and biting comments. Chandler is funny, but most of the time it's either because he's being mean or he's reacting to a scripted setup, or the joke is that his joke isn't funny. Ted Lasso and his friends have running jokes, they commit to outlandish bits, they improvise and commentate and tell stories from their lives. So that's my controversial opening statement. People enjoy this comedy show because it's funny. Please don't cancel me. Ted Lasso is wholeheartedly, unrelentingly positive. Both Ted Lasso the character and Ted Lasso the show. The opening titles demonstrate the effect that Ted Lasso has. He sits down and his positivity starts rippling out. That's the core concept of the show. What if there was a man so kind and good that the people around him couldn't help but be affected? Spoiler warning, if you've gotten this far through the video and haven't watched Ted Lasso yet, go and watch Ted Lasso and then tell everyone in your life to watch it as well. The show is fractally positive. Every episode is positive, every storyline is positive. You could probably zoom in and find that every joke and every line is positive. It never punches down. The main character is this ray of sunshine, and the season's central plot is one of redemption. A Christmas Carol is one of the greatest works of fiction of all time. It tells the story of Ebenezer Scrooge, a completely horrible man who goes on to become one of the most kind and loving people in all of literature. Over the course of the story, he's forced to dive into his past, learn why he became so miserable, and in the process, how to undo it. This is the story of Rebecca in season 1 of Ted Lasso. Rebecca is the football club owner, she's Ted's boss, and in the first scene of the first episode, we find out that she's going through this public, humiliating divorce and how much she's hurting. Halfway through the episode, we learn that the whole premise of the show is driven by her quest for revenge. She's hired Ted so the football club will fail so that her ex-husband will lose the one thing he's ever cared about. For a lot of shows, that kind of conflict would be enough to fuel stories for years. By the end of the 3rd, 4th, 5th season, you could still be telling stories of the dastardly Brit trying to sabotage her bumbling American employee. But Ted Lasso truly commits to positivity. Instead of remaining a villain, Rebecca goes on the same journey as Scrooge. She's confronted with the past, the good and the bad, and she sees the harm that what she's doing is causing right now. And in the weirdest sequence of the whole show, a puppet skeleton takes her to the future and shows her her grave. Rebecca rediscovers herself and in the process learns to take accountability for her actions. And just like Scrooge, we find out she wasn't always like this.
Yeah, that's not Rebecca.
How do you mean?
No, the real Rebecca is silly. Strong, yeah, but not cold.
At the end of the first season, Rebecca comes clean to Ted about what she's done, and in my favourite moment in television, he forgives her. It's incredible. It's incredible, completely unexpected, and entirely earned by both the characters and the writing. When Rebecca apologizes, she takes full ownership over what she did, how crappy it was, how little Ted deserves it, and without hesitation, he forgives her. Completely. Within like 2 minutes of learning how much she screwed him over, he completely forgives her. God, it's so good! This is an example of the emotional resonance I was talking about earlier. Within 10 episodes, the show takes us from joyfully hating Rebecca to caring about her. The show's message is that positivity improves everyone, and if they'd written a character who's already positive and likable, it wouldn't have the same impact. Instead, they wrote someone at one extreme end of the spectrum and then shifted them all the way to the other extreme. So yeah, I think if you ask most people why they like Ted Lasso, these are the two answers you get. It's uniquely funny and it's uniquely positive. But it's this third element that I actually think is the strongest, and it's the one I care about the most. So we're going to really dive into the show's structure and writing. Strap in. Ted Lasso is a positive, upbeat guy who just wants to connect with everyone around him and make friends. On paper, that's a recipe for a bad show. You can't make your central sitcom character someone who just wants to do his job well while respecting everyone around him. That's a bad idea and it shouldn't work. But it does, and it's amazing! Most sitcoms generate plots from the central flaws of the main characters. Some shows take this to the extreme, like Seinfeld and It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, are about groups of truly awful people. But even the most upbeat sitcoms are still generating plots from their characters' flaws. Before Ted Lasso, I'd say that Parks and Recreation was probably the most positive sitcom out there. Like, Leslie Knope really wants to help her friends and family. She wants to improve the lives of her constituents. She's upbeat and happy. But the show is still centered around her flaws. She'd ignore other people's opinions, take on more than she could handle, refuse to admit she was struggling. She was a control freak and a perfectionist, and she cared too much and she worked too hard. That's not a criticism. I think she's one of TV's best characters, but it just demonstrates how much Ted Lasso broke the mold. Ted Lasso, by himself, is not enough to sustain a show. He has flaws, but not enough to get himself into stakesy trouble every episode. He's too happy and he's too positive. But even if the show was set in Kansas, even if it still revolved around his failing marriage and a failing football team, there just wouldn't be enough there to carry a season. He'd still be fun to watch, but by itself, that's not enough to keep our attention. We want conflict. We want to see people butting heads. And every episode, we want a winner and a loser. Leslie Knope believes in big government. Her boss supports small government. This difference provides a clean, simple line of conflict. Dozens of Parks and Rec episodes just pit these ideologies against each other and BAM! Plot. That's not to say the characters don't like each other. Even happy marriages have lines of conflict. And it doesn't mean they're on opposite sides every episode. A line of conflict is a tool. It just allows you to really simply set up a point of difference and drive a plot. And the trick is to make it believable and natural. Like, this makes total sense. This is a political difference you can find all over America today. Most shows use a self-destructive main character. Instead, Ted Lasso goes hard on lines of conflict. In the first season, I counted 6. These aren't one-off disputes. These are characters on opposite sides who butt heads again and again throughout the 10 episodes. Number 1, Ted vs. the fans. Ted Lasso is an American brought over to England to coach a beloved team in a sport he knows nothing about. As you'd expect, the fans hate him. In the early episodes, the fan side is embodied by people on the streets, the pub trio, and journalists, particularly
Trent Krim, The Independent.
Number 2, Ted vs. the team. For all those same reasons, the team also hates their new American coach. Boss versus employees is a line of conflict that's fueled so many shows. In Ted Lasso, the team's hatred is personified by Roy Kent. Number 3, Ted vs. Jamie. Jamie is a much more classic sitcom character than the rest of the cast. He is self-destructive, and his plots are all generated by his personal flaws.
You're a battler, Jamie. It's really hot. But maybe someday you should stop battling the people that just want to help you.
And even though he's part of the team, he continues to hate Ted Lasso even after everyone else has been won over. I should mention, all of these lines of conflict are one-sided. Ted Lasso doesn't hate anyone. And that's what I mean when I say the show wouldn't work if it was set in his hometown. He needs a bunch of people to hate him without any of it being his fault. And of course, none of this is an accident. It was all set up by number 4, Ted vs. Rebecca. Rebecca brings Ted in to be hated by everyone. Even if he just randomly moved to England, he wouldn't have organically been hated by so many people. It's all part of her machinations, creating enough conflict to fuel one perfect season. Her plot, her Scrooge journey, was written to provide the show with Ted-focused lines of conflict. And the show also has 2 lines of conflict outside the main characters. Number 5, Jamie vs. Roy Kent. The has-been versus the new cocky favourite. This is a classic line of conflict, and it makes total sense within the show's sports setting. Number 6, Rebecca vs. Higgins. Rebecca hates Higgins, for good reason. He used to help her ex-husband cheat on her, and she forces him to make Ted's life hell. It doesn't drive as many plots as the other, but it is there throughout every episode. So why am I spending so much time talking about basic character dynamics? Because I want to make it really clear. Without breaking a sweat, Ted Lasso managed to set up 6 distinct lines of conflict, each of which are completely organic and justified, each of which drive multiple plots throughout the season. It's remarkable. Parks and Recreation literally has characters telling the camera their philosophy, and they still only have 1 major line of conflict. The Office has 2.5. By the end of episode 1, it's crystal clear who hates who and what plots this can cause. And most shows would be happy with that. They would just keep milking those dynamics for seasons. But again, Ted Lasso completely commits to its positive tone. Even though everyone hates Ted at the start of the show, he never lets it faze him. He's always friendly to the angry fans and reporters. He knows he'll win over the team. He brings Rebecca biscuits every day. He's completely confident that he'll win over Jamie and Roy and the whole team. And he's right. This show is so committed to positivity, it subverts the very format of sitcom by breaking down its lines of conflict. All of them. You can't do that. That's why I fell in love with the show in episode 3. That's when I realized this show was unlike anything I'd ever seen before. Ted spends a day with one of his biggest detractors, who does everything he can to dismantle Ted's cheerfulness, to pierce the persona, and work out what he's really up to. And by the end of it, he fails. Ted wins him over. He's on Ted's side now. They completely destroy the line of conflict. They just blow it up. In that same episode, Ted makes some serious progress with Roy Kent, who represents the team's hatred for him. For the rest of the series, episode by episode, Ted takes everyone who hates him and turns them into an ally and a friend. Everyone. Except Jamie. We'll get to him next season. The writers do this incredible job of setting up these lines of conflict and then tearing them down in a way that no one's done before. You don't destroy the engine of your show. That's what keeps the show going. That's what fuels it. You can't destroy your engine. But by the end of episode 9, everything that made the show work structurally has been completely dismantled. All in the name of positivity. It's incredible. Screenwriting 101. Stakes are what the character has to lose. The more something matters to the character, the higher the stakes. In his amazing video essay, Endings, Michael Arndt talks about 3 types of stakes. External, emotional, and philosophical. External stakes are the main focus of blockbuster movies. If we don't stop the bad guy, we die. The world gets destroyed. You get it. TV needs to be able to produce episode after episode while still keeping interest. So the main genres focus on jobs that have recurring stakes. Detectives have to close the case before the criminal strikes again. Doctors have to act before the patient dies. Emotional stakes are exactly what they sound like. They're internal stakes. They don't care about the world at whole. They often don't care about other characters. They're about how you feel. It's about things that matter only to the character. falling in love, making a friend, being respected, respecting yourself. Inside Out is my favorite movie of all time, and one of the most incredible things it does is it makes the emotional stakes of Riley the external stakes for the rest of the characters, because they are inside her mind. So anything she feels affects their world. Sitcoms tend to rely more on emotional stakes than external stakes, but every story has some of both. A sitcom is a comedy based around a situation. We know the situation can't change, so the external stakes have to stay pretty low. So the comedy comes from making the emotional stakes as high as possible. Michael Arndt talks about how he did this while he was writing Little Miss Sunshine.
Well, what's externally at stake in Little Miss Sunshine is whether Olive Hoover is going to win the Little Miss Sunshine contest. When I was writing the script, I thought, what I was going to try to do was to have the smallest possible set of external stakes, but then have the emotional stakes and especially the philosophical stakes be as big as possible.
That's obviously a movie, but there are countless TV examples. Joey breaks a chair. No one's going to die, no one's going to lose their job. All he has to do is buy a new chair. But we learn that it's not just a chair. It has a name, Rosita. It's a chair that means so much to him. This is also why the central characters of sitcoms are often so unreasonably invested in ridiculous things. Michael Scott falls in love with every woman he meets. Liz Lemon leads a mutiny over how long her plane is on the runway. Low external stakes, emotional stakes through the roof. Again, this is where Ted Lasso breaks the rules. The closest we get to this is the episode where Rebecca is obsessed with finding out where the biscuits come from. But other than that, none of the characters are unreasonably invested in small things. Ted is dealing with a divorce. His emotional stakes revolve around how the woman he's built a life with feels about him. Rebecca is a bitter, angry woman. Her emotional stakes are about hurting her ex-husband. Every character has grounded, realistic emotional stakes. Roy's entire plot for the season is about accepting that he's no longer the football player he used to be, and he's made this his entire identity. It's not a comedy plot, it's real. On top of that, the whole season has a set of really clear external stakes, the football team's rankings. Interestingly, this one's driven by the antagonist. Ted is the lead, but Rebecca is the one pushing the plot forward every episode. His job is just to react to whatever the villain throws at him. She's the one who turns the team against him, the fans against him. She's sabotaging his efforts every chance she gets. And if she succeeds, if the team doesn't win enough games by the end of the season, AFC Richmond will be relegated, and a lot of the players will lose their jobs.
I understood this mission when we were in Kansas, but those were kids, and these are professionals, and winning does matter to them. And it matters to me.
This is important. For us to care about a story, for us to be invested in whether a character succeeds or fails, we have to know what they have to lose. Stakes have three parts: what they're trying to achieve, the consequences if they fail, and a ticking clock of some kind. Here's some great movie examples. We have to raise $5,000 in the next 11 days, or the orphanage will be shut down. We need to get back home before moving day, or we'll never see Andy again. If we don't escape before Darla gets here, she's going to kill Nemo. This is why competitive sports make such good TV shows. Every episode has a literal ticking clock built in. And a really well-written set of external stakes adds the emotional stakes on top of that, a reason why this specific character cares about this specific set of stakes. The orphanage is where the Blues Brothers grew up. Andy is the toy's whole world, and Nemo really likes being alive. We've gotten to know these characters. We like them. We like seeing them work together. The club is at risk of being relegated. That gives us a goal, a ticking clock, consequences, and emotional stakes. I don't care about sports. I really don't care about sports. And so I don't know how standard tournaments or semifinals or league positions work. And if I'm being honest, I don't want to know. Please don't talk to me about sports. But for the entire first season of Ted Lasso, the sports stakes are crystal clear, even to me. And I don't care about sports. The show holds my hand through every game. It tells me what they're trying to accomplish, what are the consequences, why I care. It talks to me about sport, and I love it. I care about this specific team and this specific game, and I have a better understanding of why people like sports generally. I didn't think that was possible. So emotional stakes are about the character, external stakes are about their environment, philosophical stakes zoom out even further. They're about how the world works, or how it should work. Every story ever told is a morality tale. By showing us what actions are punished and rewards within the story, the author is saying, hey, this is how to be in the world. Ted embodies positivity, forgiveness, teamwork. Rebecca represents hatred, destruction, revenge. That line of conflict is the philosophical stakes of the season. In most shows, you just have these characters face off every episode. One wins, one loses, we live to fight another day. But the writers didn't just want positivity to win the battle. Instead, the antagonist switches sides. Positivity doesn't just win the war. Like, the antagonist, the enemy army, joins your side to fight with you. That's really unusual for a war. I know I'm talking a lot about the redemption arc, but no one's done this before. The writers weren't just showing off, they were committing to their central theme. They were making a point about positivity and embracing it more thoroughly than any show ever has. Where most sitcoms would take a cynical people never change angle, Rebecca sincerely apologizes, Ted forgives her, and the be excellent to each other philosophy wins. I lied earlier. I said that the two main reasons people say they love Ted Lasso is that it's uniquely funny and uniquely positive. But there is a third. The characters. Every character on this show is the best character. Even the villain, he's easily one of the two best Ruperts ever played by Anthony Stewart Head. So let's break it down. What makes a character lovable, and how does this show do it so well? Firstly, we're just attracted to positive characters. Or negative characters. As humans, we're attracted to people with a strong point of view. Roy is angry. Ted is positive. Sam is positive. Danny is sort of more positive. Secondly, we love an underdog. You show us someone who's been crushed by life, fairly or unfairly, and we can't help it. We just love them. We're on their side. We want them to win. So Ted's a double whammy. He's set up to fail. He's hated by everyone. And he stays positive. And bonus, he's funny. And my entire dating life is based on the fact that people like funny people and Australian accents. Nate and Higgins are classic underdogs. I haven't spoken much about Nate yet, but there's a lot about him coming up in the season 2 video.
You still laughing and stuff? You don't think it's funny, huh?
I'm not always sure what's a joke and what isn't.
Here's a brief summary. When we first meet him, he's a coward who can't stand up for himself. Ted emboldens him, recognizes he's a tactical football genius, and by the end of the season, he's hired as the team's third coach. And that's the next thing I think we really love, a character arc. Sitcoms don't normally do this, like characters will grow very slowly, but by the start of the next episode, they'll have forgotten whatever lesson they just learned. But Nate and Higgins and Rebecca, they all change and grow in a single season, and we go on their journey with them. Like, you can't help but love them by the end of it. I love them so much! Beard stumped me for a while. He doesn't really have a strong point of view, he's not very positive, he doesn't change. But then I realized the fourth and final thing that we really love about a character is when their name accurately describes the bottom half of their face. The writers obviously worked out who they needed for the story to work, the coaches, the players, the staff, the journalists, and then they went above and beyond and added Keely. She's introduced as one of the players' girlfriends, but she quickly builds a relationship with every other character, and she plays a key part in redeeming Rebecca. Keely is the best example I've ever seen of a character who is so much more fun than she needs to be.
Yeah, I am cute as a button and I can run my ass off.
In a show about two men coaching an all-male team, most writers wouldn't have put women in at all. But this show centers a female friendship, and it's the best part of the show. Well, equal best with every other part of the show. All the characters in Ted Lasso are simple and unique and charming and consistent. Like, even when they change, it's growth that's in alignment with everything we've seen so far. When Rebecca's redeemed, it's not a sudden twist or a shallow apology out of nowhere. They did the work. We've witnessed her regret. We've seen her realizing how much she messed up. Rebecca starts the show as a bitter shrew.
Humbug.
And by the end, she is warm and loving, and we are there for it every step of the way. Nate starts shy and insecure, but we watch Ted build him up and coax him out of his shell, and when he becomes confident and assertive, it makes sense. These aren't different characters by the end of the season. They're the same people, but each one of them has grown in their own way. No other sitcom does this. So those are the only 5 things I have to say about Ted Lasso. And what? Rich Berlow is the writer and artist behind the webcomic Order of the Stick. I remember reading an interview with him years ago where he talked about how he had to stop reading fan forums because every time someone correctly guessed what was going to happen, he felt compelled to change it. But people were able to guess because it was well set up. That's a good thing. If it's actually impossible to tell where a story is going, it's just random stuff happening. Good storytelling is about paying off established elements, about setting up and then following through, not just pulling stuff out of left field to trick your audience. So no, Subversion is not inherently good, and it's definitely not a requirement. But my favorite media experiences are the ones where I'm watching and I have no idea where it's going to go and I'm completely along for the ride. I will never forget the first time I saw Sunset Boulevard. I couldn't have predicted what the next scene was going to be, let alone the end of the film. But Billy Wilder is such a master of the craft. I knew wherever he was taking me, it was going to make sense and it was going to be amazing. The first time I watched Ted Lasso, I had no way of predicting what was happening next. Every time I thought I had a handle on it, they would turn two enemies into friends and destroy a line of conflict, and I was there for it because everything they did was perfectly built on everything that had come before, and it completely took me by surprise. In sitcom, characters don't change. They can't change. And you cannot take a villain and turn them into a hero. That's not how this works. But Ted Lasso does, again and again. They even subvert the external stakes of the season. We learned pretty early on that AFC Richmond cannot win the championship under these new coaches. Halfway through the season, we learn that they are doing so badly they're at risk of being relegated.
Okay, so if the Premier League is the best, then what's the league called right below it?
The championship.
Now, hold on a second. So if you come in last place in the Premier League, you get to play in the championship? Man, this town's got a weird way with words, don't it?
For the first time, the show takes Ted's defining trait, his positive attitude, and turns it into a flaw. You know, like a normal sitcom. He doesn't care about winning, but he has to. More than feeling good or improving lives, this matters. If they lose, there are consequences. In the final episode, they pull out all the stops. They're losing, and after learning all they have to do is tie, they tie. And then while they're celebrating with seconds to go, they lose. The show makes it clear you can take nothing for granted here. A typical sports narrative would demand a last-minute victory. Instead, we get a last-second loss. You thought the positive tone would guarantee them a win. It's subversion, but not just for subversion's sake. And then, in the last scene of the season, Rebecca, now an ally, makes it clear that she's not going to split up the team. The show ends with the most incredible setup for the next 2 seasons. She's going to keep them on with Ted in charge.
Then we come back to this league and we do something that no one believes we could ever do. Win the whole thing.
They set up stakes and we got invested in them, and then they subverted our expectations in a way that made sense. And then they subverted them again in a way that made even more sense. No other television is like this. Everything on this list is something that Ted Lasso did perfectly and in a way that no one has done before or since. I loved this show. I became evangelical. I shouted it from the rooftops. I bought multiple friends Apple TV Plus subscriptions just to make them watch the show. After 1 season, it was my favorite show of all time. And then season 2 happened. And that's going to be a whole video of its own. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed, hit the like button, tell a friend, and check out my Patreon account. If you subscribe, you get advanced access to all my upcoming videos, including Ted Lasso Season 2. And if I get enough support, I can keep on making these, which I would like, because I love talking about TV. That's all for now. Peter out.